We are happy to have you with us today. And I have a minute or so past the hour. We've got a good number that have come on in, so we will get started. Welcome on behalf of Plano Public Library. We're glad to have you with us today. This is a class on virtual job interviews, preparing for success. We are so happy to have with us Dr. McClain Watson from UTD. He is professor with the business school and communications. He is a great presenter and we'll have some tips for you today in preparing for virtual job interviews, which of course are so common now that we're in the situation that we're in. And we also, the library has other resources that can help you in preparing for jobs and for your interviews. We also have a number of technology classes coming up that we'll show you at the end of the class today. So thanks for being with us. And Dr. Watson, you ready to begin?
Let's do it. Yeah. Hello, everyone.
Right.
Thank
you.
Thanks for coming. Please let me know if you're having trouble hearing me in the chat. You're welcome to add comments in the chat or come online and do it through a microphone. It'd be great to hear other people. I'm used to teaching online, and it's weird doing that and not getting very much feedback, but I am used to it. So if you want to add comments in the chat, I would love that. But anyway, thanks again for coming. I hope you're doing well. I hope your family's doing well. I hope you're enjoying the weather cool down and as much of a leaf color change as we get up here in North Texas. It's a pretty nice time of year, I think. But we are going to be talking about virtual interviewing, which Kristen said all interviewing is virtual these days. So my goal is to give you some things to think about as you move into an environment. Maybe you already have interviews scheduled and you're here kind of on an emergency basis because you have an interview, let's say in a couple days, and really want a chance to think through some things. Hopefully this will be helpful for that. But even if you are not currently interviewing, it is more and more important that you be able to think through your kind of choices in a virtual interview, because these are going to be more and more common after COVID. Obviously, 2 years ago, the concept of virtual interviewing, the practice of virtual interviewing existed, and it was something that companies were moving into more and more for several reasons, which we'll talk about. But COVID made it kind of a have to. And we're all very confident that even when COVID is over, that virtual interviewing is going to be a big part of the landscape forever. And so kudos to you for thinking ahead and being kind of on the front edge of that evolution of interviewing, but also the whole idea of what it means to present yourself as a confident, warm, confident person when you're talking to a webcam. It's different. And I'm excited to talk through some of those differences and some of those best practices as far as we know in the next few minutes. So thank you again for coming. I am going to share my screen now. This is a topic that we do a lot of workshops on, especially in the Career Management Center at UT Dallas, and they have very graciously let me borrow some of their material for this workshop. And so obviously if you're a UT Dallas student, then you have access to this, but even if you're not, there's a lot of public facing information on the UT Dallas CMC Career Management Center website. So it's a great place to look for resources. And again, those are most of, the premium stuff that you have to pay for is, restricted to students, but there is a lot of really useful public information there. So just a heads up about that. Now, as I mentioned, virtual interviewing is something that is kind of becoming a very robust sector in the tech world. Obviously, it requires a lot of programming and system capacity to be able to conduct virtual interviews, but it's much more than having a webcam and being able to do a video chat, right? That would be pretty easy. What these systems do is much broader than that, and we'll talk about some of that here in a bit. But these are just some of the companies. HireVue is the main one. That's kind of the big player in this sector. And so chances are, if you have a virtual interview, then it will be run through HireVue. But there are a lot of other competitors as well. And again, there's only going to be more and more movement in this space. So again, this isn't really this is something that companies offer as a part of their application process, but but the companies like, let's say, JP Morgan doesn't develop these technologies internally. It buys access to a system like HireVue and embeds that into its already existing applicant tracking system. And we'll talk more about ATS, applicant tracking system, here in a minute. But more and more companies are using these systems. And once we talk through kind of the benefits to the company of virtual interviewing, I think you'll see why. Of course, so we are not really concerned with benefits to the company. We're concerned with what it means for us as applicants. And so, while it provides a huge cost benefit and time benefit to the company, it does create an additional burden on applicants. And so anyway, that's something that we should always keep in mind. Here is a bit of testimony from a hiring manager at Keurig Dr. Pepper. And I'll just read this because it gives a sense of what you can do with the virtual interview platforms. Monday morning, the recruiter comes in and posts the role. Within an hour, we're receiving applicants, and the hiring manager is reviewing those applicants. At the 5-hour mark, the recruiter got the email from the hiring manager that said yes to a particular candidate. Then the recruiter picks up the phone, calls the candidate, extends the offer, and the candidate accepts. Now, obviously, this is not a typical timeline for how hiring is done, but because virtual interviewing can be incorporated into the early stages of the application process, it is possible to move this quickly to hire someone, and in a situation where it would not have been as quick, or it would not have been as quick of a process if we were doing things in the traditional manner. Obviously, in the traditional kind of the way we all think of interviewing, the interview is something that happens at the very end of the process. So you submit your application. These days, the applicant tracking system slices and dices the applications and finds maybe, a certain number of people who the ATS says can do the job. Then humans come into the picture, look at those 20 or 25 applicants and figure out who to bring in for an interview. And then the interview is done typically before the offer is made. But virtual interviewing allows for the interviews to be done at the very beginning of the process. And this leads to, like I say, a situation where as you are clicking submit for your resume and cover letter and application, other stuff you do for the application, that when you click submit on those documents, the very next screen may say, please get ready for a screening interview. You'll be asked 3 questions and you will record through webcam. The system will record your responses, and then all of that will be part of your application. So they can actually see people early when they apply. And there's a lot of reasons why, as you can imagine, this is good for the companies, but it is something that you need to be aware of because, like I said, it's not going to be something that's advertised to you when you open up the application, but it may be part of the application process. Now, typically what these early interviews, when you apply virtual interviews, they are called video introductions, basically. And, we've always known that the resume and application and cover letter are very kind of cold, if you were to think of them in terms of their like emotional tone. The resume is just a series of mechanical like bullet points. You very rarely get a sense of a human being from a resume. The cover letter, you can do a little bit more of that because it's in first person and you're using that kind of I language. So that's where the cover letter can be really useful in kind of warming up the application. But the video introduction and the virtual interview as at the early part of the job application process means that um, you you can show yourself. The company gets a chance to see you and hear your voice and get a sense of your charisma and a sense of your energy and a sense of your confidence and optimism and excitement about the opportunity. Um, so again, the same sorts of questions may be asked, like you see here on the slide. What are your skills and experience? What do you want to do for our organization? Why do you want to work for us? Right? These are, you know, classic questions that you get in any interview. But if you can answer those things effectively early in the process, which you should be able to do, then you will get a leg up on other candidates or other applicants. So again, here's kind of the process, and this is how they do it at Children's Mercy. The job seeker introduces themselves via video. Recruiters watch and share video introductions. Now, there may be, at this point in the process here, where recruiters watch and share video introductions, it may be a live person, like an actual person watching the video introductions, or it may be an AI system that analyzes the video, that analyzes the introduction. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Then it could be that the job seekers are directed to best fit applications. So as you know, when you're talking about a large company, you may be applying for job A, but if the person or if people can see your video introduction and get a sense of your background and goals, then they may see that you're better fit for job B. And that kind of inter-application transition is possible now with these video interviewings. Then you ideally move to hire after that. So like I said, the virtual interview allows for the interview to have to be a part of the early stage of the process. And so again, that's all the more reason why we need to, take this virtual interviewing seriously and understand that it's very likely that we're going to be doing it. So as I mentioned, there's the live now kind of video introduction, early screening interview, and then there's the on-demand interview. And there are different kind of steps for each of these. So the live interview just involves actual people. And so it's kind of like a one-on-one interview, but you're doing it over webcam. And you get that chance for conversation and for, the sense of possibility that comes with a live conversation with another person. And that can be really good for you in the interview, because you're able to determine where the conversation goes. You're able to respond to questions, but also ask questions. So this is pretty much the traditional kind of interview that we're used to, but it happens early in the process and it's happening over webcam. And as I said, there are some things that we want to think through with a webcam interview that we don't need to think through when we're doing it in person. And there's kind of pluses and minuses about that, which we'll talk through. The on-demand is the one that is automated. And it's not on demand to you, it's on demand to the employer. So you can imagine, think about how much time it takes to interview people. I mean, and how, the whole logistics of interviewing. And of course, you're not interviewing one person, you're interviewing several people. And if you're in an interviewing role, then you're interviewing people all week. And you can imagine how kind of costly that is from a time standpoint for organizations. So with the video interviews now, since they're all recorded, you don't need to be there live, right? You don't need to watch it live. You have it on demand. It's like you have kind of your own like internal company YouTube or something where you can just watch whenever you need to, videos of these video introductions or these early screening interviews that take place online. So this is one that's either watched by a real person, but again, more likely you have a, a kind of analysis done by the system. So a system like HireView isn't just a webcam, a video, a web video capture system. Again, that's pretty easy. But what a platform like HireView does is it will and we need to put scare quotes around a lot of these words. It will analyze your performance. It will analyze your facial expression. It will assess your emotional, the tone of voice. And I'm using scare quotes because the science behind a lot of this is kind of, flimsy and a bit snake oily. But, these systems do this kind of analysis, and then usually they'll give the interview a score, which combines all the assessments and analysis that the system has done. And that score is ultimately what's used by employers to determine whether or not they want to stick with your application. So anyway, you see again here the live and on-demand sorts of differences between these two. And of course, please, if you have questions or should clarify anything, or you disagree, or you have a different experience, please add that in the chat. I would love to hear from you. But like I said, these systems are automated. And again, well, I don't know if I've done a lot of hiring, mostly for teachers in an academic setting. And so it's different. But if you've ever done any hiring for a for-profit organization, you will know how it's so attractive to have applicants do an interview, then have a system give a score of that interview using kind of key metrics that you program into the software. And so if you have, let's say a score from 0 to 50, and you have 20 applicants, you're going to pick the applicants to carry forward in the process that are at the top of that score. Even if the score is kind of, bogus, or even if the score is, not really the most rigorous, analysis of facial expression or verbal tone, you're going to do that because you want to make this as easy on you as possible, right? So figuring out how to perform well in these systems, which are not assessed by humans, but are assessed by this artificial intelligence is tricky, because every system is proprietary and every system has, its own special sauce that goes into the scores that it gives. And so, unlike interviewing with a human, where you can, be pretty sure how to create a sense of competence in their mind, where you can be pretty sure how to create a sense of warmth and friendliness in the mind of another human, right? In terms of your facial expressions, how you hold your body, words you say, how you smile. With an artificial intelligence system, especially one that's proprietary and you don't know which one you're using, it's not as easy, right? It's not as straightforward. So one of the good things for students is that some of these companies will license their system to universities, so that, for example, our career management center can train students how to do a strong virtual interview on the actual systems that they may be interviewing on in 6 months when they start applying for internships or jobs. And some of these systems even have public facing opportunities for that as well. So that's definitely something to look out for if you are interested. Now, before the interview, we'll get kind of specific here. From a dress standpoint, you want to think of the virtual interview in the exact same way that you think of the in-person interview. For a couple of reasons. One, especially from the shoulders up, because that's probably all they're going to see. Um, you want to be kind of sending the signal that you have prepared in the sense, or in a way similar to how you would if you were applying for or you were doing an interview in person. And this is just something that people expect when you're interviewing for a career type job. They want you to kick it up a notch from a fashion standpoint, not fashion, but kind of formality of dress standpoint. Because we all have kind of, our default for interviewing is the before times when we were in person. And if someone came in like a sweatshirt or in a t-shirt, even if they're at home, right? Even if it is a virtual interview, that doesn't mean that it is not one where similar sorts of expectations for dress don't hold. Even if people won't see, if you're wearing pajama pants, I still recommend that you dress up. And that's for the second reason, which is that, what you wear doesn't only kind of exert influence outside of you in the minds of other people. It has a power that goes inward. You are different. You feel more confident typically when you dress up a little bit, whether it's for, uh, a date, whether it's for a job interview, whether it's for some kind of important occasion. So we all understand that. So you want to put yourself in the best position to be confident and to kind of feel good for that interview. And it's a small effect, but this is a job interview. This could change your life. And with us, even though it's a small effect, we're trying to take advantage of everything that we can to increase our chances of success. I can't see in this share screen if there's stuff going on in the chat. It looks like there may be.
I don't see anything in the
Okay.
chat,
Okay.
but I would like to remind our participants that you may certainly type something into chat. And if you would like to speak your question, you can do that as well. Just let us know in the chat and then we can unmute you.
Yeah, please do. Thank you. Now, obviously, in a virtual interview, it is completely dependent on the technology working, and not just kind of having an internet connection, but having all of the pieces work correctly and optimally. And so you're absolutely going to want to think about things like lighting, like which we'll show an example of here in a minute. Webcam quality is something that I think people are pretty flexible with. You may have done Zoom conversations or web chats with people recently where you're like, wow, that's a great image. That's a great camera. But most of the time the webcam is pretty low quality, but it's good enough. The main factor though is going to be lighting, and we'll see an example here in a minute. So that may mean that you need to kind of walk around your house or your apartment and look for spots with the best lighting and try to figure out a way to do it there. Now, my wife's a teacher also, and she's teaching today, and she's in the teaching room that we have set up. We kind of changed our office a little bit so that we get natural light, and we've got, the setup in there. So I had to move to a different room, which is fine and easy. But if you see here, I'm right by the window, and of course the blinds are open. Usually we have a solar screen on this window, but I went and took it off to let the light in. You're also sitting on top of a pillow because the angle of the camera really can make a difference. You'd rather not kind of have people, looking up at your, for me, my 3/4 chins now. You would like for the thing to be elevated, ideally, and you can do that. Just stack some books, move to a place. I've got the computer on the dresser. I'm standing up. So this is obviously not how, I normally do things. But again, in the situation of an interview, you need every little 1% difference that you can stack because once you stack a few of these small things that can really potentially be meaningful in the eyes and ears of the stranger that you are talking to. So most of these interviews are going to use something like Zoom, but it may be an internal system. So again, if it's a big company like State Farm or something like that, then they're going to have their own system, and you're going to be dialing in, or you're going to be clicking the link in the email they sent you. And it may be something like Zoom or Teams, but it may have different branding. And so you want to be kind of ready for that. With the lighting, again, you're just going to want to play around with it. And really that involves not just changing the light, but changing the angle of the webcam, because both of those things kind of work together. And so this is better. There's more light here in this image, but this is, oops, sorry. This is probably what we would call best out of those three, because you have kind of light coming from both sides instead of from up top. You see here and here, there's really kind of no light. So again, nobody's asking you, to use ring lights or, light things that kind of photographers do. If you can and want to and have that stuff, go for it. But you are going to want to think about the composition of your scene. And this is pretty plain here in the back. We've got our kind of droopy fan here. So this is probably not optimal, but you just want to kind of an uncluttered environment as much as the stranger can see. So it's going to take some preparation, just like it would take you time to find out how to get to the office if we were doing it, in person. Here, the time is going to need to be spent on kind of decluttering your environment as much as possible, locking the door. Amazingly, my 4-year-old hasn't, banged on the door. I think he's learned a lot this semester about kind of staying away. The dog here is perfectly content, but may need to go out. So that's a bit of a risk I'm taking here. And certainly in an interview, you would not want to potentially have a dog needing to leave the room. I had a student a couple of weeks ago say that he was doing an interview, a remote interview, and I felt so bad for the guy, kind of, but he got he got telephone calls, 4 or 5 calls in the middle of this interview, and it was a spam apparently. And I was just like, why didn't you turn the phone off? I didn't say that to him because he was already kind of beating himself up about it, but it was just like, we should be thinking about these things and try as much as possible to reduce the distractions that might come up. Now, having said that, I do think one of the things that COVID has taught us is that nobody's perfect. And if something happens, like if a kid comes into the room or starts banging on the door, or if the dog starts barking, or if there's, the people cutting the grass across the street, are blowing leaves and it's, really hard to hear, I don't think that is going to be a huge deal, because again, we've all been there at this point. Everybody kind of is a little bit more flexible when it comes to that. So obviously you don't want those things to happen, but if they do, I think most folks are understanding and are, might even humanize you a little bit to have an imperfection in your environment, because like I said, we're all dealing with that. And I think there's a little bit maybe of empathy that we have for these things that we might not have had before. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Interrupt you for just a sec.
Yeah,
sorry.
Of course.
I think that you've pretty much answered the question, but I'm going to read what was asked. What should be in the background? I've heard you put your name and contact information and the position applied for, or should it be a blank background? And the questioner is asking like a hostage situation.
Right.
I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
And then another question that was very similar or about the same topic is, what do you think about the Zoom backgrounds? Are they perceived as professional assuming that you choose a tasteful one, or is that something better to avoid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great questions. And, it's hard to answer, are they seen as professional, because, it's a mixed bag. And it depends on what the background actually is and how it's done. Um, I don't, I hadn't heard before of I assumed the person meant on the virtual background, putting name and position applied for, which is kind of neat, I guess. Um, but I don't know. Again, this gets kind of to the whole issue of like paranoia about and fear about the interview. The interview is primarily a fear-based, activity for most of us, and we have to get over that to become kind of confident and warm and friendly. But yeah, we all want like the background that will not offend anyone ever, and we all want to do the exact perfect thing. But the problem is we don't know the people that we're talking to, and it's just hard to assume what they're going to think is the most professional. um, I think if you had I think, again, maybe what we're going for here is that we almost want the background to just disappear in a way, and to not be a factor one way or the other. There's very little upside, I think, or there's very little that you're going to gain from any kind of background that you have, unless you have a picture of you doing some kind of obscure sport or playing some kind of obscure instrument or something, and the person interviewing you also plays that obscure instrument. That would be pretty cool. But I think we're just trying to minimize risk here, and so for that reason, um, I think having either the blurred background, or having a zoom background, if you want, that is very neutral, very, don't have like a skyscraper. This wall is not neutral, by the way, on the slide. There's a lot visually going on here in this wall. And so if you're going to go with something with an artificial background, you're going to want something that's smooth and is almost, again, just kind of completely neutral in a way. Um, but if you do have, like many of us do these days, a kind of workspace or a place where you are comfortable in front of the camera, then there's no reason to not go with that. Um, so again, great question. It's not one answer. Um, I think certainly you may also get some guidance from the employer as far as where you should be and what you should have in the background. So I think that, like I said, I would have never thought of making a background with my name and the position I applied for. It's a really cool idea. And certainly if they ask for something like that, then you would do whatever they asked for. Um, but anyway, again, not distracting, that's not very helpful advice, I know, because distraction is subjective. And, but I think generally speaking, again, we're pretty flexible with what folks have in the background. And, I guess maybe the last thing to say about this is that we want the emphasis and the focus to be on us and our face and our enthusiasm, our energy, our eye contact, which is challenging, of course, because you're not looking at another person, and you're doing kind of what I'm doing here, which is not looking at the camera. I'm looking at, very narcissistically, myself on Zoom. So one of the things that you could do that I've heard people have success with is to tape like a popsicle stick behind the webcam, and to put like a friendly face or even kind of a generic smiling photograph of someone on that popsicle stick, so that your eye gets drawn to another human face to look at. That, again, is a very small modification to your environment that may be useful to you, and that may actually help keep you focused on yourself instead of what you're looking like in the other small screen here. So, again, how do we, if we're doing a regular interview, we've got our entire body and we've got the other person's body, we've got a physical space, and we would talk and could talk and do talk in regular interviewing workshops about how to make smart choices as far as nonverbal behavior. In a virtual interview, though, of course, it's all kind of upper third at most of your body. And so you're really going to want to be focusing on your eye contact and as much as you can, kind of your hand gestures. Um, but your smile is really key. They're always going to be seeing your face. And if you can combine kind of regular, maybe not constant eye contact, but regular eye contact and a smile or something that kind of looks friendly, then that is going to make a big deal, a big impression in the mind of the stranger, because people aren't really used to that, and people still have this feeling that, well, it's a virtual interview, so the bar is lowered for human expression. And I think that's not helpful, especially in the context of an interview. We want to keep the bar at the same level. And so as engaging, as connected, as enthused as we can get and seem, the better. So we have some guidance here for eye contact. Again, this is hard. For as far as posture goes, I think standing, is a great way to make more likely positive posture. A lot of times when we're sitting, we're hunched, especially if the laptop is on a table and we're obviously above the table, then we're kind of looking down into it. And, you know, none of these things by itself is a deal breaker or something that's going to turn someone off. But combined with two or other things, it could potentially be part of a larger tapestry that is not as attractive to the stranger as having, better posture, more regular eye contact, and all of that. This last point here is really helpful. Of course, they have your contact information, but you don't have theirs. And so it's always a good idea to get at least one number that you can call if something happens with the tech. Now, one of the most common kind of questions that you're going to get these days is called a behavioral interview question, or sometimes called a situational interview question. And these are challenging. So, it used to be that most interview questions were um, future oriented and hypothetical. So let's say a question would be, what are some things you would do to develop your skills further if you got this position? So the what would you do is the key there. Now, you could not want to do anything at all to develop yourself in the future if you got the position, but you could still make something up, right? It's future oriented, it's hypothetical. Okay. So, of course, everyone is going to answer that question in a way that makes them seem really great, and the answers are going to be kind of easy for that reason, because you're just making stuff up. In contrast to that, the situational or the behavioral interview question forces you to look back in time. And these are hard. That's why most of these these situational questions are really the ones that you get very commonly these days. Because these questions aren't what would you do, but they are tell us about a time when you were part of a team at work and there was a conflict. How did you resolve that? So it's a much better question because it's going to give them actual, facts and details from your own experience. So that's a great question for them, but it's hard for you to answer that because you're not making stuff up. You're having to look into the past and identify a time when this happened and then tell a story that creates confidence in the mind of the stranger. So it's tough. But we have this mnemonic here called STAR, situation, task, action, results. That is not an answer to a situational question, but it can be a structure for an answer. And so essentially you go through these 4 steps here. What was the situation? What were you responsible for? What task were you responsible for? What actions did you take to complete or what did you do basically to demonstrate your skills or to address the problem? And then what did you achieve? So again, this is a structure for responding to a question, and it is in your interest, I think, to prepare a couple of responses to these sorts of questions, because you are going to get them. And they mostly have to do not with technical questions about the job, but with kind of um, team and communication and relationship sorts of topics. So again, a team where you had a conflict. Um, what was a time in the past 6 months where you exerted a leadership role on a team or in a situation? Tell us about that situation and what did you do to become a leader in that situation? So stuff like that. And again, the Career Management Center has a ton of public facing materials on their website that you are free to use about situational and behavioral interviewing questions. So I really recommend that you check those out. Here are some more examples. So you see how kind of connected these are, again, not to technical matters, but to relationships and how you deal with other people. And this is primarily what people are interested in an interview, you know, especially if it's an interview towards the end of the process, because they've already seen your resume, they've already seen your application. You are doing an interview because they have already kind of bought it. You know, they've already agreed that you have the background and the experience to do the job. But they, of course, want someone who does more than just the job. They want a strong teammate. They want someone who can handle uncertainty. They want someone that other people like to work with. They want someone who is always asking questions and who wants to do more moving forward. And so that's why these questions are so important. Your technical skills and credentials, you know, they're good with that already if you're getting an interview at the end of the process. So you don't really need to spend that much time in the interview hammering your resume, because you're like, no, you're good. You know, that's why you're here, is because we like your resume. Now we want to find out about you. So again, these behavioral interview questions really help establish that sense of humanity and of that kind of three-dimensional person instead of what you get on a resume. Now, a key thing to do after every interview, but it also goes for a virtual interview, is to send a follow-up. And that is probably going to be in the form of a thank you note. And I know that you are probably thinking, oh, a thank you note, that's such a kind of quaint, you know, like early 20th century practice, you know. And if you know, your parents maybe made you send thank you notes when you were a kid, you know, and you hated doing it and you're like, why? And you just didn't get it. Well, this is kind of similar to that, but also different. It's similar in that, yes, it is a pure courtesy. Um, but it's also more kind of strategic in a way as well, because you do want to express your thanks. You do want to tell the person you interviewed with that you enjoyed meeting them, that you enjoyed learning more about the organization and about the opportunity. You do want to say those things. You may have said them at the end of the interview, but this is where the second thing comes in, because this thank you note comes a day or two after, and they've forgotten about you, you know, um, or at least you kind of drop back into the abyss, you know, in their memory. And so when you send that thank you note, or when they receive that thank you note, you are kind of popping up again, and they're like, oh yeah, we met her. Oh yeah, she seemed like, you know, she knew what she was doing. This is a really kind thing she did. And I know also probably that you assume that everybody always sends a thank you note. So if I send one, it's not really going to make that much of a difference because everybody always does it. And definitely that is not the case. Okay. Very few people do this, even though it's so simple. It takes 5 minutes out of your life. But sending that follow up after the interview, and again, I should probably distinguish between follow up and thank you. The thank you comes a day or two after. Sending it by email is totally fine. 3 or 4 sentences. Okay, that's it. Um, one of the questions that you want to do or ask at the end of your interview is, what is your time frame for making a decision about this position? Because that's going to be really useful information for you. And because, when you finish the interview, you're going to walk out or, close the laptop, and you're going to be on pins and needles, right? And if you were the first person they're interviewing and they have 6 more interviews over the next 2 weeks, you really want to know that so that you don't kind of, stress yourself out for 2 weeks for no reason. So asking at the end of your interview what the time frame is for making a decision is a great idea, because it gives you a sense of the process, but it also helps you kind of calibrate how much, to worry about it, because we all do after we've interviewed, right? So the follow-up then comes if, let's say that they say, well, we've got a couple more interviews, but we'd like to make a decision by the middle of next week. If the middle of next week comes and goes, then on Monday, the following week, you're going to want to send what we call a follow-up, which is where you ask, you say, hey, thanks again. I really appreciated meeting you. I just wanted to see if there had been any decision made about the position. Um, I know that you were hoping to have been able to make a decision middle of last week, but I just wanted to follow up and see if any movement has happened on that. Obviously, you wouldn't say exactly that, but something like that. And so that's what we call a follow-up. And that is a little bit awkward because, you may have not been chosen and you're kind of asking them to tell you that, which is, excuse me, of course, something we would rather not do. But again, we want to know, we need to know. So that is perfectly fine to do, but that's another reason why you ask them what their timeline is, so that you respect their timeline and then follow up after 2 or 3 days after that if you haven't heard anything. And I know I've been in situations at least 10 times where I told somebody I was interviewing that I was really hoping to make a decision by next week, and it ended up being like weeks after that. And so things change and timelines change, and so you want to be in. You want to know what their timeline is so that you can then check back in and they can update you, maybe if it's been extended or if they did make a decision. Thanks for interviewing. We'd love to hear from you again the next opportunity we have. Whatever the response is, you want to get that. You don't want to be in that awful limbo that is such a part of interviewing, that it's really one of the psychic tolls of interviewing, is that you interview and you may never hear anything back, or it's just a kind of dreadful situation to be in. So I think, just in closing here, I'm really hopeful and thankful that you have spent some time with us today. I really wish all of you the best if you're interviewing or as you're looking to interview in the next couple months. We've got a few minutes left if there are any questions in the chat, or if anybody wants to chime in.
There
if you have
is
yeah,
one more question.
great.
What are your thoughts of sending the thank you note immediately after the interview? You mentioned a few days afterward. To send, and obviously with everything virtual now.
Yeah, immediate. I guess I'll take immediately to mean like from your car or something, right after you walk out. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that would mean in the mind of somebody else, but for me, I think it would feel a little bit less authentic if it came, immediately after, like literally immediately after, like an hour or two later. I think it would. I think the sweet spot is probably a day or two for the thank you. So I certainly don't think there's any benefit to you to sending it immediately. We're really just trying to, the other reason is because if we send it immediately, then they just saw us, so we don't get the benefit of having that kind of reminder about us a couple days later, after they have already probably, if not forgotten, then, we're not top of mind anymore. So I think that's another great reason to send the follow-up 1 or 2 days later. Should we also ask how they will contact us with decisions? Yeah, that's a great question, Yolanda. Yes. Again, just because you know, it seems silly to say, but yeah, I mean, that you want to ask because you want to know. Are they going to call you? Is it going to be an email? Are they going to update? You know, in some big companies, you have a a profile in their system that you log into, and they will change your status in that system, and that will be how they notify you. So it's a great question. Of course, in the old days, it was obvious how you would find out. It'd be a phone call. But you're right, there are other options here, other ways to do it. So being as aware as you can be of their process is always a good idea. Yeah, good question. Anything else? Again, I wish you all the best, and I hope that you and your family stay safe in these next few weeks. I think, Kristen, did you have some information you wanted to pass along?
Sorry, yes, I do have some other information that I was going to share. We do have some other programs and resources from Plano Public Library that you may find helpful in your job search or skill building, so that perhaps you are a better fit for a job that maybe they have specific technology skills that you need to update. So I am going to share my screen and just show a few slides, information from Plano Public Library. And meanwhile, if there are other questions for Dr. Watson, you can certainly put those in and we'll continue to answer those. So the Plano Public Library is more than books. And so this is just a reminder that is more than just checking out books that can help you from your public library. We have skill building opportunities with online courses through lynda.com. This is a subscription-based program that costs money, but when you have a Plano Public Library card, it is free to you. So you can access thousands of courses and certificate programs through lynda.com. Primarily, they relate to technology, business skills, and digital creativity. And I've listed some of the examples here of the types of topics that are available. We have also great courses, which are also online courses through Canopy. Some of the topics here, public speaking, nonverbal communications, these are sorts of things that you could get some benefit from watching an hour or two worth of programming that may help you with your preparation for your interview. Also, these sorts of programs like we're doing today are available via Zoom, and I typed into the chat. Actually, I'm not sure if I gave you the link to the calendar, but I can do that at the end if that was not part of it. We also have a program called Book a Librarian that you can get one-on-one help with, say, your resume formatting or information on the top bullet here, reference solutions. We have a database with excellent business information that can help you seek out information. You can do research on the companies that you might want to interview with, and also on positions and even names of like HR professionals and things, reference solutions. We do have a program on how to use reference solutions in your job search, which is posted. I'll show you at the end. We have a number of these programs, the recordings when they're posted, you can access them on our YouTube channel or on our website. Also, business news through the New York Times and the Dallas Morning News and worldwide newspapers are actually available through the Plano Public Library at no cost. Dallas Morning News and the worldwide newspapers are through a service called Press Reader. And we also have a large number of e-magazines and e-books available related to business leadership, various different topics, including not only business, but things that you might be of interest for personal finance, or even things like gardening, popular mechanics, things like that, that just maybe have some give you other topics for discussion or conversation, small talk as you're starting your interview. And leadership books, autobiographies and biographies by business leaders. So that's another way to just get some ideas flowing and perhaps topics for small talk as you're beginning your interview. On the lighter side, just as we'd like you to know other ideas, things that are available at the library for your entire family and friends, we have language learning, pronunciator, and other materials that you can check out to help you learn a variety of languages. We have classes and kits on art and creativity, science, STEAM kits. We have 3D printing, which is not currently happening, but hopefully will be restored soon. That's only because of the close contact with the coronavirus going on right now, but that will be restored at some point. We have bullet journaling classes, STEAM activities, writing workshops, all kinds of things. Upcoming classes that are coming. Reference Solutions, as I mentioned, is you can use it for your job search. You can also use it for business research if you are building a business and creating a business. So if you've been interested in starting an online business or consulting, for instance, you may be interested in this program on November the 20th, or you can find in our archive the program on how to use Reference Solutions for job search. We have how to use Adobe InDesign. This is for custom e-cards. So it's a more personal way to use Adobe InDesign for these e-cards, but you could certainly use that skill then to apply to business purposes. Also Adobe Photoshop and Microsoft PowerPoint. And then we have an entire series coming up in December on using Microsoft Excel. Excel is continually one of the top requirements or skills that, as far as technology skills, that companies are looking for when they're hiring. So if you need to brush up on Excel or just interested in being able to use it for personal reasons, for instance, creating your own personal budget, you can learn about Excel from Plano Public Library. All of these are free, open to the public, and they're on Zoom, like the one that we're doing today. And then this is some of the things that are in our video library, other programs that have been done that are recorded and archived that you can find. I'd like to point out the one in the center, Navigate Your Future, shows how to use some databases from the federal government through the Department of Labor that are available that can help you look at different career options. If, for instance, you've been out of the job market for a little while, or you're not sure you want to go back to the kind of career that you were in previously, this can help you look at different skills and other options for using those skills in the job world. So other possibilities for a career. And much more than what I have listed here. We are happy to have you with us today. Thanks for being a part of this. And I'm going to make sure that we don't have any other questions.
There was one question
Yes, I see.
From Erica. Yeah. And her question was, once you received notice that you did not get the job and have contacted HR and no feedback was received, what are your thoughts of contacting individuals from the interview panel to get feedback regarding areas to improve? Well, I think if you have their contact information and if you are comfortable and feel, just based on your experience in the interview that they, might be helpful, then you're of course welcome to do that. I wouldn't expect though a lot of insight from them probably though, because they're not, trained to give interview feedback necessarily. And there's so many factors that go into why someone gets an offer and another person doesn't, that the interview may not have been a factor at all. So it may kind of put someone on the spot in a way, I think definitely this is something you'd want to do over email and not on a phone call. give someone time to kind of type up a polite and helpful, hopefully helpful response. But yeah, if you have the contact information and feel kind of empowered to do that, then there's nothing stopping you. But again, I wouldn't expect a ton of useful feedback on the interview unless there was some huge thing, that was just so obvious for them to tell you. The other thing that I just wanted to say really quick is that, if you graduated from a community college or a four-year university, you have access to that school's career center for life. Almost every school does it that way. So you want to, remember that. And that is a benefit that you have as an alum. So that school may have a ton of really useful resources that you can access as an alum. You may need to get you may need to get an ID or something, credentials to log in. But as an alum, you have access to that. So just wanted to remind you of that in case you've forgotten. We have folks at UCD who've been out for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, graduated that long ago and still use our CMC a lot and are really helped by it. So just a reminder that you have access to that. But thanks again for coming. I appreciated you being with you.
I'm not seeing additional questions, but our attendees, you may certainly still ask a question. I put a link in the chat to the rest of our small business workshops and career workshops for the fall. Actually, this is small business workshops, but what this list is all of those technology classes so that you can register for any of those that you may be interested in. Thank you so much, Dr. Watson, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. Thank you to UT Dallas for sharing you with us. And thanks for all of you who participated today. You're going to receive a survey. We hope that you'll give us some feedback and even other topics that you're interested in. We love to hear that so that we can provide what is useful to our community. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day.